He was just a lost surveyor looking for water. She was an Apache beauty performing a sacred ritual. But when he accidentally saw her, her next words would bind their lives together forever. Now you must marry me, or they'll punish us both. This is their story. Liam O'Connell was a man who believed in straight lines and clear maps. An immigrant from the Green Hills of Ireland, he had found work as a surveyor for the Great Western Railroad, a job that promised a future built on logic and precision. His world was one of theodolites, chains, and the unwavering certainty of a compass needle pointing north. He was a good man, honest and hard-working, but profoundly naive about the ancient, unwritten laws of the land he was helping to tame. For 2 days, he had been lost. A sudden rockslide had separated him from his survey party, sending his horse bolting and leaving him with a half-empty canteen and a map that was now useless. The unforgiving sun of the territory had baked the moisture from his body, and a desperate, burning thirst was now his only companion. Led by a sliver of green in the distance, he stumbled through a narrow canyon, praying it would lead him to water. When he finally pushed through a thicket of salt cedars, he stopped, his breath catching in his throat. Before him lay a scene of impossible beauty, a hidden oasis, where a clear, spring-fed creek pooled into a tranquil basin surrounded by ancient cottonwood trees. But it was not the water that held him captive. In the center of the pool, bathed in a halo of dappled sunlight, was a young woman. Her long, black hair cascaded down her back, and a single eagle feather was braided into one of the locks. She was performing a ritual, her movements slow and graceful as she bathed, a quiet, reverent expression on her face. She was the most beautiful creature Liam had ever seen, a spirit of the wilderness, wild and pure. He knew he should leave, that he was intruding on a moment of profound privacy, but he was utterly mesmerized, rooted to the spot. His presence, however, did not go unnoticed. She suddenly froze, her head snapping up, her dark eyes locking onto his. The serenity on her face vanished, replaced by a look of pure, wide-eyed panic. But it wasn't just his presence that terrified her. From the woods on the other side of the creek, 3 Apache warriors emerged, bows drawn, their arrows aimed directly at Liam's chest. They were the woman's protectors, the guardians of this sacred place, and they had seen his transgression. To them, he was not a lost man, but a trespasser, a defiler. The woman, whose name was Nita, saw the murderous intent in their eyes. She knew the law of her people. A man who spied on a woman during her purification ritual was to be met with a swift and brutal death. Her mind raced, a desperate calculus of survival. To save him meant sacrificing her own honor. To protect her honor meant letting him die. But her father, the tribe shaman, had taught her that all life was sacred. In that split second, she made an impossible choice. She rose from the water, hastily clutching a deerskin wrap to her chest, and placed herself directly between Liam and the drawn bows. She shouted at the warriors in her own tongue, her voice not pleading but commanding. Then, she turned her burning, terrified gaze on Liam. She spoke to him in broken, heavily accented English, her words a shocking, life-altering demand. "You have seen me unveiled. By the law of my people, your life is now forfeit." She saw the confusion and terror on his face. She took a deep breath, her next words sealing both their fates. "There is only one way. Now you must marry me, or the elders will punish us both." Liam stared at her, dumbfounded. The world had ceased to make sense. One moment, he was dying of thirst. The next, he was mesmerized by a beautiful woman, and now he was being offered a choice between a wedding and a death sentence. He looked from her desperate, pleading eyes to the deadly arrows of the warriors, and knew that his life, once a straight and predictable line on a map, had just taken a wild, terrifying, and irreversible turn. Liam's stunned silence was taken as assent. The Apache warriors, their bows still taut with suspicion, escorted him from the creek. He was not treated as a prisoner, but as something far stranger, a groom-to-be brought to his own wedding against his will. They led him on a hidden path for hours, deeper into a territory his maps had marked only as unexplored. Nita walked behind him, her face a mask of shame and fury, refusing to look at him. He had not only stolen her privacy, he had stolen her future. She was the daughter of the shaman, promised to a great warrior. Now, she was bound to this clumsy, pale-skinned outsider. Their arrival at the Apache camp, or rancheria, was met with a wave of stunned, hostile silence. Children stopped their games to stare. Women paused their work, their dark eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. Liam, a man used to the orderly world of survey charts and decimal points, was now an alien creature in a world that operated on ancient, unspoken rules he could not comprehend. He was brought before the elders. The debate was fierce and conducted entirely in a language he didn't understand. He could only watch as Nita stood before them, her voice strong and clear as she explained the situation. She was taking responsibility for his life, and in doing so, binding it to hers. Her father, the shaman, a man with eyes as old as the mountains, studied Liam with an unnerving intensity, searching for any sign of deceit. Finally, with a grave nod, the decision was made. The law would be honored. The wedding ceremony was nothing like the joyful, flower-filled affair Liam had imagined in his distant Irish dreams. It was a solemn, public ritual. He and Nita were made to stand in the center of the village as the shaman chanted, binding their wrists together with a single leather cord. There were no rings, no joyful pronouncements. It was a contract, a legal binding of two lives, witnessed by an entire tribe that saw him not as a new son, but as a necessary disgrace. When the cord was cut, he was a married man. But as he looked at his new wife, at the cold, resentful distance in her eyes, he had never felt more alone. Life as Nita's husband was a lesson in humility and isolation. He was given a space in her family's wickiup, a traditional dome dwelling, but it was a space on the far side of the fire, separated by a wall of silent disapproval. Nita would not speak to him unless absolutely necessary, and when she did, her words were clipped and practical. She would leave food for him by his sleeping mat but would never eat with him. He was a constant, humiliating reminder of her broken honor. The rest of the tribe treated him like a ghost. The men ignored him, their faces like stone. The women would whisper as he passed. He, a skilled surveyor who could map a mountain range, was now utterly useless. He didn't know how to hunt with a bow, how to properly tan a hide, or how to read the subtle language of their culture. He tried to help, but his efforts were often clumsy, earning him the quiet scorn of the warriors. He was a burden, a walking symbol of his wife's sacrifice, and the weight of that knowledge was heavier than any pack he had ever carried. He was a prisoner, not of ropes and bars, but of a culture he could not penetrate and a wife who despised him. Days bled into weeks, and Liam's existence in the Apache camp remained one of profound isolation. He was a man without a purpose, a gear that did not fit in the intricate clockwork of tribal life. He watched the hunters leave each morning with a longing ache in his chest. He saw the women working together, their hands moving with practiced skill, and felt the sting of his own uselessness. He was fed, he was sheltered, but he was not a part of their world. He was a ghost, haunting the edges of a life that was not his. Nita's coldness was a constant, chilling presence. She fulfilled her duty as the law demanded, providing for his basic needs, but nothing more. Yet, even in her distance, Liam began to see the woman beneath the proud warrior. He saw her gentleness with the children of the village, the respect she showed to the elders, and the fierce intelligence in her eyes as she listened to the council debates. His initial fascination by the creek was slowly being replaced by a deep, grudging admiration. The first small bridge was built not with words, but with water. The tribe's main source of water came from a spring that trickled down from the high cliffs into a natural basin. But the late summer had been dry, and the spring had slowed to a mere trickle, forcing the women to make the long, arduous journey to the main river each day. Liam, a surveyor who understood the logic of landscapes and the flow of water, watched them. He saw the inefficiency, the wasted effort. One afternoon, while the men were out hunting, he went to work. He used his surveyor's eye to trace the path of the spring back to its source. He cleared away the rocks and debris that had partially blocked the flow upstream. Then, using his knowledge of engineering, he began to construct a simple but ingenious aqueduct system using hollowed-out logs and carefully placed stones. He worked for 2 days, fueled by a desperate need to be useful. The Apache women watched him from a distance, their expressions a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. On the 3rd morning, the result of his labor was clear. A steady, clean stream of water now flowed directly from the source down into the basin, doubling its volume. The daily journey to the river was no longer necessary. It was a small miracle of logic and effort. When the warriors returned, they looked at the new waterway, then at the quiet, white-skinned outsider, and for the first time, the stone in their expressions began to crack. They did not praise him, but the scorn was gone, replaced by a grudging respect. That evening, something changed. When Liam returned to the wickiup, he found not just his usual bowl of food, but also a new, thick buffalo hide blanket laid out on his sleeping mat. It was a silent gift, a thank you. He looked at Nita, who was busy tending the fire, her back to him, but he saw the slight flush on her cheeks. It was the first act of kindness she had shown him since their forced marriage. A few weeks later, he found another way to be useful. He noticed the tribe's arrowheads, though effective, were often inconsistent. He, a man who understood angles and balance, used the forge in the village to create a simple stone mold. It allowed the flint knappers to create arrowheads that were perfectly uniform, more aerodynamic, and far more accurate. The hunters, testing the new arrows, were astonished by their improved performance. The respect he was earning began to thaw the ice between him and Nita. Their silences became less awkward. One evening, as he was sketching a map of the surrounding territory from memory in the dirt, she came and sat near him. Watching, she began to ask questions, not about his world, but about the map. She pointed to a pass and told him it was haunted by the spirits of their ancestors. He pointed to a river and told her how water always seeks the path of least resistance. They were not talking about their feelings, but they were, for the first time, sharing their knowledge, their worlds. The forced, silent union was beginning to transform into a fragile, unspoken partnership. He was no longer just a burden. He was becoming an asset. And she was beginning to see the man, not just the outsider. As the first chill of autumn began to snake down from the high peaks, a new anxiety settled over the tribe. The traditional winter hunting grounds, a sheltered valley to the north, had become increasingly dangerous. Rockslides had become more frequent in the main pass, and 2 hunters had been lost the previous season. The elders debated, but no one knew of a safer, alternate route through the treacherous mountains. It was then that Nita, in a move that surprised everyone, including Liam, spoke up in the council circle. She told the elders of the maps the white man drew in the dirt, of his strange knowledge of how the land was shaped. She suggested that he, with his surveyor's skills, might be able to find a new path. It was a huge gamble, staking her own growing reputation on the abilities of the outsider she was bound to. The council, swayed by the hunter's respect for his improved arrowheads, reluctantly agreed. They would send a small party to scout for a new route, and Liam O'Connell would guide them. Nita, as his wife and translator, would go with him. For the first time, they left the village together, not as captor and captive, but as partners in a crucial mission. The journey was arduous. For days, they navigated the rugged backcountry, far from any familiar trails. Liam was in his element again. He moved with a new confidence, his surveyor's mind reading the contours of the land, calculating slopes, and identifying potential weaknesses in the rock formations. He saw not just mountains, but a complex puzzle of ridges and valleys, of watersheds and fault lines. Nita watched him, her admiration growing. He was not just guessing. He was reading a language in the earth that was as complex and as beautiful as her own people's stories. She, in turn, became his guide to the land's spirit. She would point to a ridge and tell him not of its geological age, but of the legend of the sleeping giant who was said to lie there. He would map a stream, and she would tell him it was the path the spirits took to the afterlife. It was a merging of 2 ways of seeing, 2 ways of knowing. One evening, as they sat by their campfire, far from the watchful eyes of the tribe, the last of the walls between them finally came down. He asked her about the feather in her hair. She explained it was an eagle feather, a symbol of honor and vision, given to her by her father upon her coming of age. She then, hesitantly, asked him about his strange tools, the compass and the sextant he had managed to salvage. He explained how they worked, how the small, trembling needle of the compass always sought the magnetic north, a constant, unwavering truth in a chaotic world. He spoke of his home in Ireland, a land of soft green hills so different from this harsh, beautiful country. He spoke of his dream, not of taming the land, but simply of understanding it, of mapping its secrets. In the flickering firelight, she saw him not as a clumsy outsider, but as a man of deep thought and quiet passion. He saw her not as a stoic Apache warrior, but as a woman of profound wisdom and a deep connection to the world around her. He learned that her name, Nita, meant bear in her language, a name given for her strength and protective nature. She learned that his name, Liam, meant strong-willed warrior, a description that, she was beginning to realize, suited him perfectly. After 3 days of searching, he found it. A narrow, hidden pass, a game trail, long forgotten, that bypassed the dangerous rockslide area completely. It was a safe, direct route to the winter grounds. Their mission was a success. As they stood on the precipice, looking down at the safe path below, a shared sense of accomplishment, of true partnership, settled between them. He had earned his place, and she, looking at the strong-willed warrior beside her, finally understood that the cruel twist of fate that had forced them together might not have been a punishment after all. It might have been a different kind of destiny. Their success in finding the new pass forged a new, unbreakable bond between them. The journey back to the village was different. They rode side by side, their silences now easy and filled with a shared understanding. The weight of their forced marriage had been lifted, replaced by the lightness of a genuine friendship. Liam no longer felt like a prisoner, and Nita no longer felt like a jailer. That night, as they made their final camp before reaching the village, Liam finally found the courage to ask the question that had haunted him since the day they met. He asked her, his voice quiet and respectful, to help him understand the law that had bound them together. From his world, a world of courts and written statutes, it seemed a cruel and barbaric tradition to force a marriage or a death sentence upon two strangers because of an accident. Nita was silent for a long moment, staring into the flames. She knew this was a pivotal moment. To tell him the truth was to share the deepest wound her people carried, a secret pain rarely spoken of to outsiders. But he had earned her trust. He deserved to understand. She began to speak, her voice low, telling him a story passed down through generations, a story that was the dark, bloody foundation of their harshest law. She told him of a time, 2 generations ago, during the first, violent conflicts with the white soldiers. A young Apache woman from their village, a girl known for her beauty and spirit, had been found by a patrol of soldiers while she was gathering herbs by the river. What happened next was a brutal act of violence that scarred the soul of the tribe forever. The soldiers, after violating her, had left her for dead. She did not die. She managed to crawl back to the village, broken in body and spirit, and lived out the rest of her short, haunted life as a ghost among her own people, a constant, living reminder of their inability to protect her. The shaman of that time, Nita's great-grandfather, saw the poison this event introduced into their world. He saw the fear it created in the women and the helpless rage it fostered in the men. He knew that their survival depended on their strength, and their strength depended on their honor and their absolute commitment to protecting their own. It was then that he created the law, a law that seemed cruel on the surface, but was, in its heart, a shield forged from pain. This was the plot twist that changed everything for Liam. Nita explained, her eyes shining with the unshed tears of her ancestors, that the law was never meant as a punishment for the woman. It was a promise. It was a vow made by the entire tribe that a woman's honor was the tribe's honor. The law's true purpose was to ensure that any outsider who breached that sacred boundary could not simply walk away from the consequences. By forcing a marriage, The law forced the man to become a part of the tribe, to be held accountable, to provide for and protect the woman whose life he had irrevocably altered. And if he refused, the death sentence was not for his transgression against her, but for his ultimate act of disrespect towards the entire tribe. It was not a law of vengeance. It was a law of absolute accountability. It was a desperate, extreme measure, born from a desperate, extreme trauma. In that moment, Liam's last vestiges of cultural judgment crumbled away. He saw not a primitive custom, but a profound, albeit brutal, system of justice designed to protect the most vulnerable. He understood the terror in Nita's eyes at the creek. It was not just fear for herself, but the fear of a history of pain repeating itself. He looked at her, his wife by law, his partner by trial, and his friend by choice. He finally understood the true weight of the bond they shared. He had accidentally stumbled into a sacred story, and the law had made him a character in it. His quiet, Irish sense of honor resonated with the fierce, Apache code of accountability. He reached across the fire and gently touched her hand, a gesture of profound empathy and a silent promise. He understood now, and he would not fail her. Their return to the village was met with a reception that was starkly different from Liam's first arrival. When the hunting party confirmed the existence of the new, safe pass, a wave of relief and respect rippled through the community. Liam was no longer the clumsy, useless outsider. He was the map maker, the man whose strange knowledge had secured their future for the coming winter. The elders nodded to him in acknowledgement. Even the young, proud warriors looked at him with a new, grudging admiration. He had earned his place. For the first time, he felt a sense of belonging. He and Nita worked together, their partnership now easy and natural. The forced marriage had become a genuine friendship, teetering on the edge of something deeper. A fragile peace had settled over them, a hope that perhaps fate, in its own strange way, had led them exactly where they needed to be. But the world of straight lines and clear maps had not forgotten him. The threat appeared on the horizon one afternoon, a cloud of dust that resolved into a party of 5 riders. It was his old survey team. But the man leading them was not their former, decent-minded foreman. It was a man named Barlow, a hard, cruel man Liam had always distrusted, a man who saw the land not as a place to be understood, but as a thing to be conquered and exploited. Barlow and his men rode into the village with an arrogant swagger, their rifles held ready. He expressed a false relief at finding Liam alive, claiming they had been searching for him for weeks. But Liam saw the lie in his eyes. He saw the way Barlow's gaze swept over the village, not with curiosity, but with a cold, calculating assessment. He wasn't here for a rescue. He was here for something else. Barlow's true purpose was revealed quickly. He spoke of rumors, of a sacred creek, a hidden oasis. He told the elders that the railroad required access to all water sources in the territory, and that his team was there to survey the creek for a potential pumping station. It was a blatant lie, a legalistic excuse to invade their most sacred space. The Apache warriors tensed, their hands moving to their weapons. Nita's father, the shaman, stood before Barlow, his face like stone, and calmly refused, stating that the creek was a place of spirits, not of machines, and was not to be defiled. Barlow laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. He turned to Liam, his expression turning venomous. "O'Connell, Pee-Pee, you've been living with these savages for months. You must know this land now. Tell them the railroad gets what it wants. Or did you forget which side you're on?" The entire village turned to look at Liam. He was caught in an impossible position. To his right stood the world he came from, a world of contracts, of progress, of men who saw the land as a resource to be plundered. To his left stood Nita and her people, a world of tradition, of spirit, of a deep, sacred connection to that same land. Barlow was forcing him to choose. Was he Liam O'Connell, the railroad surveyor? Or was he the husband of Nita, the map maker of the Apache? In that heavy, charged silence, Liam's entire life seemed to hang in the balance. He looked at Barlow's cruel, expectant face and saw the soulless, grinding machinery of the world he had left behind. He saw the cold logic that would desecrate a sacred place for profit. Then he looked at Nita. He saw her quiet strength, the fierce pride in her eyes, and the memory of her telling him the story of her people's pain, the reason for their harsh laws, their deep need for protection. He remembered her teaching him the names of the spirits, and he remembered teaching her the names of the stars. He knew then that this was not a choice between two sides. It was a choice between a life without a soul and a life with one. This was his all-in moment. He turned his back on Barlow, a simple, profound act of defiance that spoke louder than any words. He walked to stand beside Nita and her father. He was no longer in the middle. He had chosen his side. Barlow's face contorted in a mask of fury. He saw this not just as a refusal, but as a betrayal. He spat on the ground, calling Liam a traitor, a savage lover, and swore he would be back with enough men to wipe the village off the map. As he and his men rode away, leaving a trail of dust and threats, the Apache warriors looked at Liam, their expressions a mixture of shock and a new profound respect. But Liam knew this was far from over. Barlow was a man of his word, and he was backed by the railroad's limitless resources. That evening, as the elders and warriors gathered in the council circle to plan their defense, Liam stepped forward. He was not just a member of the tribe by law anymore. He was a member by choice and by action. And he would bring his own unique weapon to this fight. Unrolling his precious survey maps, he became the map maker once more. But this time, he was not mapping for the railroad. He was mapping against it. He used his inside knowledge, something no Apache warrior could possess. He showed them the surveyor's plans, the routes they would likely take, the weaknesses in their strategy. He pointed out the narrow pass where they could be ambushed, the high ground that was best for defense, the hidden spring miles away that could be poisoned to cut off their water supply. He was using the very tools of the civilized world to defend the savage one. He was turning the enemy's logic against them. As Nita translated his strategic insights, a quiet awe spread through the council. They saw not just a brave man, but a brilliant one. He was not just fighting with them, he was leading them. He had fully and completely committed his fate, his knowledge, and his life to her people. His loyalty was no longer divided. He was one of them. 3 days later, Barlow returned, just as Liam had predicted. He brought with him not surveyors, but a dozen hired guns, ruthless men with no regard for life, their faces hard and cruel. They rode into the narrow pass, confident in their superior firepower, expecting to crush the small Apache village with a single, brutal assault. They were riding into a perfectly laid trap. From the high ground, the Apache warriors unleashed their attack. Arrows flew with deadly accuracy, striking not just the men, but their water canteens and supply packs, just as Liam had suggested. Boulders, loosened beforehand, were sent crashing down, blocking their retreat. The hired guns, expecting an easy fight, found themselves in a chaotic, inescapable kill zone. The fight was not long, but it was fierce. Liam fought alongside the warriors, not with a bow he had yet to master, but with a rifle he knew so well. He was not fighting for land or for progress. He was fighting for a home. But his most important battle came when 2 of the gunmen broke through the main line, charging directly towards the village where the women and children were hidden. He saw them coming, and he saw Nita standing before the Wickiups, a rifle in her own hands, ready to defend her family. Liam ran to intercept them, placing himself between the gunman and his wife. He took a bullet in the shoulder, the impact spinning him around, but he did not fall. Fueled by adrenaline and a love so fierce it eclipsed all pain, he raised his own rifle and ended the threat. As the last of the gunmen surrendered, the battle was over. The tribe had won, their victory swift and decisive, thanks to the mapmaker who had become their war chief. Nita rushed to Liam's side, her face pale with terror and relief. As she tended to his wound, her hands gentle but sure, the last of the distance between them vanished forever. They had not just planned a battle together. They had fought it together, protected each other, bled for each other. Their bond was no longer one of law or friendship. It had been forged into love in the heat of battle. 3 months later, another ceremony was held in the heart of the Apache village. It was not a forced, somber affair like the first. It was a true wedding, a celebration of love and victory. Liam, his arm now healed, stood beside Nita. He was dressed not in his surveyor's clothes, but in ceremonial buckskin, a gift from the tribe's elders. He was no longer an outsider. He was a son, a brother, a husband. Their wrists were bound again with a leather cord, but this time, it was not a chain of obligation, but a symbol of their willing, joyful union. Nita's father, the shaman, performed the ritual, his voice filled with a deep, happy reverence. He declared that Liam's spirit was now tied to the spirit of their people forever. In the years that followed, Liam never returned to the world of straight lines and clear maps. He had found his true north in the heart of the Apache nation, and in the love of his wife, Nita. He never became a great hunter, but his wisdom as a strategist was valued in the tribe's councils. He and Nita had children of their own, children who were a beautiful blend of two worlds with his clear eyes and her fierce spirit, fluent in both the language of their mother's people and the stories of their father's homeland. One evening, as they stood by the sacred creek where they had first met, Nita turned to him. "The law said you had to marry me to save your life. The law was wrong. I had to marry you to find my life." And he knew it was true. The lost surveyor had finally found his place on the map. He had stumbled into a sacred place looking for water, and had ended up finding his entire world. If this story of a love that bridged two worlds touched your heart, click the video on your screen now for another unforgettable tale from the Wild West. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment below. Your support helps us map out new adventures.